Hello, friends, and welcome to Worldbuild with us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with my co-hosts Daniel Quinn and Courtney Staples. On today's episode, we finish up our time in the Tower of 1,000 Crossovers. Now, last episode we left off, we had our patron Jay submit a prompt that had us taking 3 of our previously established settings and mixing them all together in some kind of amazing gumbo-style new setting. As always, I'd like to remind everyone that this is the second part of a 2-part series. By all means, you really need to go back and listen to that previous installment because otherwise it's going to be really confusing. And before we get into today's episode, of course, if you want us to build your world, you can always go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com, click the link, follow the instructions, and within a reasonable amount of time, we'll be building your world. If you want to follow us on social media, don't right now, because Twitter is, oh boy, it's not looking good. Instead, go straight to our Discord where you can chat with us about world building, introduce your own world, ask questions about anything you want, and generally just chat and have a good time. It's lively over there. It's fun. Of course, if you, like Jay, are incredibly generous and are feeling particularly generous towards us, you can give us money over on Patreon, where you'll get access to early episodes, patron-exclusive episodes, a patron-only Discord chat, and a number of other goodies as well. I would like to thank our patrons and all of our listeners, but especially our patrons right now, for your continued support. We love and appreciate it deeply. And with all of the shilling out of the way, let's get right back into it. Where last we left off, we had a twist to reconcile, which is add in some time travel. Oh boy. Actually, this one's not too difficult. We had some pretty easy forays into time travel, but as our resident time travel expert, Daniel, start us off, explain to us how you're reconciling with this twist.
This seems to be a highly fantasy-based setting, so I think going back to what Courtney had said about an hourglass, it can be as simple as that maybe the characters don't know, but this tilting and turning, this receding of the ocean is part of a cycle that's happened before. And so when the ocean comes in, you can find things from a distant past because it's receded before. So the quote unquote time travel is encountering things from a version of the tower in many eons past. And that's part of its weirdness when you explore that ocean floor.
That was cool.
I like the direction that we're going with so far. Absolutely. The fact that it's like they're literally tides of time is quite cool. You're going to find your like great grandpappy down there somehow, just chilling out at the bottom of the ocean.
Maybe things get like preserved in this dead ocean.
Oh,
like if you fall into it or if you drop something into it, that's just going to stay like that until the tides go out.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I would like to specify that we should have them be pockets of preserved amber time, if that's cool with y'all.
Sure.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Well, to kind of preview my own, actually, I'm just going to dive right into my own reconciliation with the twist. Last time we left off, we basically made it so the heroes or the number of champions were all racing towards getting to this fixed point at the ocean floor to try and like take on this challenge, right? I am interested that time freezes in these bubbles, in these kind of champion bubbles that are created. So there are, I'm not sure if it's at the core of the ocean itself or the core of the tower, because it's technically the ocean floor and that gets really kind of complicated. But regardless, at the very bottom of this place, at the end goal, where they go is frozen in time. And I don't know how to reconcile that yet fully, but I like this idea that there are pockets of frozen time throughout the ocean. And maybe there's a deliberate movement by the tower, by the tides themselves to kind of shift them into a particular shape or something like that. But that's what I'm going with. There's pockets of time, frozen time, that are in the bottom of the ocean.
Interesting.
Is that past the gate or before they get there?
I'm going to say it's past the gate.
Past the gate. So like in the receding ocean, you can spend a lot more time than you think if you enter the wrong pockets.
Correct. And what happens as well is it's basically okay, it's an anime reference. I don't give a fuck. It's basically the parabolic time chamber in like Dragon Ball where you can just train like crazy. And like you walk out of this thing and you're like, oh, he jumped up like 250 levels just by being in there. Cause he's been training for what to him feels like centuries, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to everyone else, it's only been, a year or something like that, or however long it's been. But like the longer you're in there, the longer you have a chance to train and like do different things and stuff like that.
Presents a nice temptation because if you're traveling through an ocean, they come with limited food from the living world of living.
Yeah.
So you could get sucked into a time portal, use all your food, and now, wow, I still have like the entire ocean to go in and fuck,
It becomes tricky. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering too if there's like another kind of time bubble that almost does the reverse, where in it you don't experience the passage of time, but say you stand in there for what feels like 30 minutes, you step out and years have passed.
Yes.
Different kinds of bubbles. Like some of them, I mean, if we're thinking with like, if we're taking it out of the realm of fantasy, it would be like some that are dilated more than others,
Yeah.
Now I feel like we're kind of doing Jay's previous request, which is to do the Sky of 1,000 Lands, because we had pockets of time dilation in that setting as well. And now we're basically doing that, but like so we're adding a fourth setting is basically what we're doing, but that's totally fine. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. But anyway, Courtney, you still have to tell us how you're reconciling with time travel. So please, by all means, let us know.
Yes. So I had two kind of simpler ideas, and also they're more whimsical, I would say, than yours. The first one was that the areas where the cat scratches at this tower and unravels it, like, create these weird time flux areas where time just doesn't act correctly. And my other thought was that the magic food in this tower plays a role in experiencing different times of existence. Like, something about eating a certain type of food can bring you back in time, or maybe slow things down for you, speed things up.
Yeah, we'd have to dive into that a little bit more. What do you mean by that?
I mean, I guess it's almost like similar to what you had in mind for your time bubbles, but like instead of stepping into something, you're consuming something that changes how you experience time. Whether that's like by putting you into some dream state where you experience a previous time that already occurred, or if it's like actively slowing you down to the point where everything around you seems to be moving extremely slowly, but you're still kind of fully there.
Ooh,
interesting.
I like that. It's like, so I can see some food is designed. So I can see it as a precautionary thing. Like, you have your food to survive, but say you're in the sea realm and you run into a bubble that's going to, you're going to be in that bubble for a really long time. So 10 minutes passes outside, but you're trapped in that bubble for 3 years. So you want to like maybe train during that time. So you eat a special food, or maybe you don't want to train, maybe you want to sleep. You eat a special food that puts you into a catatonic monk slumber, right? So you can emerge refreshed. The inverse, you go into a bubble that's going to do the opposite. So it's going to like, you're going to be there for a moment, but then when you get out, like a long time has passed. Maybe the food there helps you to slow down or to speed up your metabolism so that you can get back, you can get out and not have to deal with the consequences of not having, I don't know what happened with that one, but a food that could help you in that case
yes,
too.
It's very complicated. Yes.
I like the idea that like you're going to want to bring food to counteract whatever like some of these things are. Which also suggests that there have been champions who've returned and they're like, yo, time's all fucked in those bubbles, like we're going to have to fix that, Yeah, that's kind of interesting. That's certainly something that we can work out as well, for sure.
Yeah, I keep thinking to Breath of the Wild, when you create all these like different recipes to get cold resistance or heat resistance, but in this it's like time resistance.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm sure that as we develop this a little bit more, we're going to come up with other things that need resistances as well. I'm hinting at my faction, of course, but we'll see how that goes. So time travel, it's just, or time in general, now just a weird part of the landscape, which I think works out. One question though, I feel like we need to add in the polyhedron-headed cat to this in some way, because I feel like if they're going to be a big chaos god, they're going to be attracted to, or at least interested in these kind of time bubbles. How do the polyhedron-headed cat relate to this altered time space?
Well, the first idea that I had said was that like where it scratches messes up time because it's like unraveling the tower there. But I could also see it being drawn to the bubbles as like playthings for it.
Oh,
Like,
I mean, can it
they're
be
cat
the
toys.
creation? Can it cause those bubbles?
Ah.
It is pure chaos.
Yeah, maybe it also like messes with the nature of them. So let's say in the past, an expedition found a bubble that slowed time, but in between that and the current expedition, the cats come along and like whacked it around and its nature is shifted. So like they can't really predict what'll happen.
Yeah, I just love the idea that a cat is like batting around the concept of time like it's a ball. You know, like that's very whimsical and fun for me. So yeah, I can support that for sure.
I mean, I can also see this as being how people interpret what they're seeing happening. Like perhaps the cat is some incomprehensible form of things, but the way that it appears in our limited experience is cat-like. And so that's how we attribute that to it, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh boy. All right. Well, I feel like the twist is thoroughly reconciled. So I feel like it's time we can move into the factions. Courtney, why don't you get us started off? Tell us what faction you're bringing in this time.
All right. So speaking of whimsical stuff, I wanted to bring in more of that whimsical nature of the Land of 1,000 Dead Dwarves. And since we kept the D8-headed cat, who is now running around causing mass chaos, I am introducing a faction of weavers whose role is to mend the tower and minimize the damage this cat is causing by unraveling it.
A solid idea. Absolutely. Yeah. I was thinking something similar where they're not just weavers, but they're also like architects and like artisans and, you know, masons. Masons is what I was thinking of. Yes. But yeah, go on. Tell us more about this faction.
Yes. And to tie in some of the competitive aspect too from Battle of 1,000 Suns, I'm picturing their mending almost taking the form of like knitted graffiti. Like, yes, they're doing a good thing by fixing the tower, but they're also tagging areas in a way to like assert their dominance. Like, yeah, we fixed up this area that this other group let fall into disrepair.
Yep. So it's like there's like this big ass like banner like repaired by like the Wangu crew or something like that. Yeah, that's great. I love that.
I'm visualizing them as like these people going around with these giant knitting needles and like big spools of time thread, I guess, and other sorts of really whimsical tools.
Oh yeah, I love that. I love that a lot, actually.
Is this realm consisting of mostly human things, or are there other species? Like, what's the composition?
Good question. I guess as a default, I like always picture stuff as human, but I'm open to going in whatever direction with this.
Yeah, I'm not. I want all humans if we can. If we can help
That's
it.
Fine. I don't really care.
The only reason why I asked is because since you've got kind of a Studio Ghibli vibe, I could see certain factions serving that role, you know?
I'm certainly more of like human dominated. And then if we wanted to add in like spirits and stuff like that, to add in that additional Studio Ghibli vibe, I'm cool with that. And actually that kind of plays a significant role in my faction, but I'll wait until we get there for mine.
What were you thinking, Daniel, as far as like things that could tie in with that mending aspect?
I only ask because like when you describe them at first, I picture them as like not human in some way, and more in the realm of like the weird, like you were talking, Rob, tangentially not human species that's on the fringes or that serve particular functions, kind of like the you know, what are those? Kitsune or whatever the
Kitsune.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, Kitsune are like, they're fox spirits who like seduce people and steal their souls. So like, but I get what you're saying. And actually what we might want to do is tie them back to Clark's idea of like, I'm pretty sure they were squirrels, right? Like they were like some kind of squirrel folk who like did stuff for the tower. And it's basically that, right? Like we can add some yeah. I'm if that's the case, I'm fine as long as it's mostly human. It must be mostly human. I'm not
okay.
Yeah.
I like the idea of like a squirrel clan though doing this. Like if they have some advanced climbing abilities that lets them get to certain spots and leave their tags and places that nobody else can reach.
I think that they were like flying squirrels as well because they were able to easily traverse up and down the tower. And they were rare. They were basically seen as doing like the will of the tower in the divinity, essentially. So I like the idea that if we're utilizing that same faction, this is like the kind of rougher version where it's like we're vandals, but we're also still doing the will of the tower by healing it. You know, it's like, but they're just, you know, they're also graffitiing the shit out of it. I love that blend is really quite amazing and cute, actually. Daniel, why don't you hit us with your faction? How are you combine, or what? You don't need to combine, but it sounds like that's what we've been doing. So hit us with your faction. What does it look like? What does it do? What does it smell like, Daniel?
Well, I was going to bring the dwarves from actually three things, I think, because it's the spirit of the dwarves from the dead dwarves realm who carry masks or actually carry not masks necessarily, but they carry the spirits of fallen heroes who didn't make it across the sea. So that comes from the Oni sort of creature that you had in the Wuxia Tower. And they reside in the dead ocean because they're these heroes who have lost their sense of who they were, and they're this conglomerate, each of these dwarf, like, so I'm thinking like squat, and they've been hunched over with time itself, and they've got, you know, the dwarfy beards, and they carry the spirits of the previous fallen heroes in the sea, and they've created kind of their own weird labyrinthine civilization among the ruins and rocks at the bottom of the ocean.
I like that. What do you picture them carrying the souls in?
I don't know. I'm up to ideas. I don't want it to literally be the mask because that's from the other setting, but they carry something on them that's physical and is a representation of the remnants of the heroes.
So they are literally masks, because I'm going to hit you with my faction, which are basically in not staunch opposition, but there's going to be some conflict between ours, Daniel. I went back and I listened to some of the characters we introduced from Battle of 1,000 Suns. And my original like character back then was Diana, Priestess of the Moon, who took like heroes and they basically stuck spirits into these like mannequin things that they had. And it was like shamanistic, and it was also mixed with technology because they were robots that were being inhabited by spirits of heroes. And I'm like, okay, if I just remove the robot aspect of that, that is something that we can absolutely still do. And I was also thinking of my badass Oni creature from Wuxia Tower and how it would steal masks from heroes that would basically represent their souls. And I combined those two ideas. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Why don't we have a faction of priestesses of the drowned, as I'm now calling them? And they basically take hero masks and nail them onto mannequins who then like become enlivened with the spirit of these dead heroes. And they're then manipulated by these priestesses to do the bidding of the faction.
It's creepy.
Yes, a little bit. But I also feel like, Daniel, you and I are pretty like, I see your faction as like preservers of these heroes. And I see mine as like, no, we're using them. They're tools that need to be used.
Maybe what we can do is, because I pictured these dwarves as really being the heroes in some extent, the one that have been left behind. Maybe they're not, the burden they carry is psychical because it's the memory of who they were. But your priestesses try and capture them and bring them out of their labyrinths and turn them into this mask form thing to use them.
Oh, interesting.
See, like kidnap the little dwarves.
I didn't want them to be like literal kidnappers to me. Like they're not evil necessarily. They're like more shamans, or they're more like priests or priestesses, right? Who are like, they treat the spirits with reverence. So like in my mind, I think that they're going out to the dead seas and they're like fishing for masks essentially. But to me, it sounds like if your dwarves are literal heroes who've been scrunched over with time, I don't want my faction to be like scooping you up in nets and like seeing if you're big enough to throw back or something like that.
That would be hilarious. That would be hilarious. The little dwarves being captured,
just like holding you up by the ankles. You're like, oh, he's a lively one. Whoa.
This one's too small.
Yeah, like
I love that. I love it.
It is fun. I have another idea though, Daniel. When you were talking about like you weren't sure where they kept the spirits, what if they have the spirit or the souls stored in
their
food?
assholes?
in food.
No, food works. Food.
Yes,
Yeah, absolutely.
like because food plays an important role in like the time, and there's the food of the living, food of the dead. What if that is the food of the dead? Like
they grow the food.
Yeah, they make these recipes that defines each person in there.
Yes.
And that is the food that's in there. So maybe, Rob, if like your priestesses are doing something with that food, if they're even consuming it or using it in some way with their magic, I don't know.
Yeah, I would like to. So like, I could see the dwarves as being, because they're past the point of like intelligibleness. I think they're kind of like goblin dwarves. So I could picture them like raising this
Goblins.
food. I'm thinking they're like dwarves, but they're less intelligently. So I'm thinking like they are also farmers. They're growing this food, and I could see there, because you wanted some sort of antagonism between the two. Perhaps the priestesses like take their harvests, and the dwarves try and fight with them sometimes, but really they're just kind of like, cretins at this point. It doesn't really matter. So there's hordes of little remnant heroes, and they scatter around, but they grow the food kind of unconsciously.
Okay. We can make this happen.
Ooh, did the priestesses eat the food to make the masks? Since I don't know how, or something. Maybe there's some consumption.
Well, no, the masks themselves are like, they represent the heroes who have passed, who they're dead, right? Mm-hmm. So I feel like this is something slightly different than what we're dealing with here. But I love the idea that we're introducing the food of the dead with these dwarves and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Another option, I don't know, Rob, if you'd want to go with this, but if the priestesses are making the mannequins themselves out of the harvested grains or fruits or whatever that these dwarves produce. Oh. Like, those, what are they, like the straw dolls?
The wicker things?
Yeah, the wicker, like those kinds of things, but made of like...
seaweed?
Like food and stuff kind of clumped together.
Wait, the fact that there's seaweed is actually like, I can see seaweed working pretty well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like imagine like a scarecrow, but made out of kelp. Mm-hmm. Like that is for some reason like just like unsettling enough.
It's, unnerving.
And then it's like, okay, I've made this giant scarecrow, and now I'm going to nail this like driftwood mask to it, and like it just becomes inhabited by the spirit of a dead hero or something like that.
It becomes like a golem. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that works very well for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So okay. What I would like to do, by the way, like Courtney, you have a basic function for your faction within the tower. Like that is built in. I love that. Daniel, what's the function of your like goblin dwarves that we've got going? Are they essentially just like a natural hazard? Are they like,
I mean, they're the heroes that have fallen.
No, but what's their function within the ecosystem of the tower itself? That's what I'm kind of curious about here. Because if they're just like a natural antagonist to heroes who are trying to get to the bottom of the ocean, then like that's something. But like
narratively, or do you mean like as part of the tower itself?
Yeah. What is their greater, like what is their part in the greater ecosystem of the tower itself?
I don't think that. So I think that the heroes pass through the ocean. Some of them fall and are trapped,
right, and
they become these dwarves.
Right.
And perhaps the psychic trauma of it causes them to create this food that is themselves, like their essence. Mm-hmm. And in terms of like what peril they present to the heroes in the future is that they've built these labyrinths, which are probably difficult to get through.
Okay.
That's and they're also mischievous,
Yeah, okay, wait. Like you just said something that we haven't established, that they create ruins, they create labyrinths. So the fact that they're the dungeon masters, they're like literally the ones who are creating the traps and trials that the heroes have to go through.
They could be lonely. That's why they're doing it.
Or they're just bored. Yeah, they're like,
they want more heroes like themselves,
Yeah, I'm picturing this as like corn mazes, but out of like kelp and seaweed.
Yeah.
And there's some stone in there too, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But okay, you know what it could also be? Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, I made these traps to help myself train, and then eventually they forget why they made them, and now they're just traps that are just sitting there.
Because I think they're kind of dumb. They're dumb in the forgetful sense.
Right.
Because they're so old, and who knows how many eons they've been.
They've just deteriorated. Like, why was I doing this? What was I doing? Yeah. Oh, that's good.
That's why it's easy for the priests to outwit them, because they're dummies.
Maybe even like that memory, like the food of the dead plays a role in that memory.
Yeah.
Like the longer they spend there, the more time they spend.
They've been
eating this food, the less they retain their humanity or dwarf manity or whatever it is.
dwarf man. This is why
they become dwarfs because of it. They lose their humanity. It's like, in Little Mermaid, the little shrimp guys that were the captured souls of Ursula.
Yes, I do know what you're talking about.
Like
yes.
that, but dwarf sized. And they can move around.
Yeah. I think they're called poor unfortunate souls, Daniel.
Yes, that's exactly what they are. Yeah. And because, and I mentioned them animalistic to some degree. So it's like, if you encounter them, they could throw spears at you. They could like drag you down. They could be nice. Who knows?
Well, remember that they're also like, they're still heroes. And I'm sure that they still retain a lot of like the combat ability and like the ferocity that they once had. So they're probably like physically dangerous, at least for the most part, right?
Yeah.
Unless you got like a cook hero down there and then he's like, well, I did this, or like you got like one of the swimming heroes or some bullshit, or the knot tying hero. I don't know.
And that's how you can also perhaps find a way to reason with certain ones, because you can reach down to some psychic element of them that remains,
Oh yeah. That was actually another person was running a game is running a game in your OSR Plus system. And one of his things for his campaign was that every important NPC we interacted with had like something that they sought out, or
bargaining space, he called it.
Yeah. It's like this one thing that they care so deeply about that like if you do it, even unknowingly, they'll like instantly kind of be on your side. So that could be the case here, where if you were running an RPG in this setting, like each one of these dwarves, you could roll up random things for them and like have the characters interact with this dwarf and try to figure out like what do they want? Do we just like try random stuff? Do we just like throw a bunch of things at them and see what they go for? Like
study them. You study their patterns to see what it is they might have cared about.
If we could tie it in as well, maybe like eating food of the living unlocks part of that personality again, or something like that.
And that's another reason to bring the food with you as like offerings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To share it with them. I could see someone being at the point where it's like he has only one piece of bread left and he's not going to make it. But he realizes that if he feeds this particular bread, the scent of which seems to arouse something in the dwarf's mind, that he feeds it to the dwarf knowing he's going to perish. But then the dwarf ends up being on his side and the dwarf takes him to a secret treasure trove of living food that's been in a time bubble, and it allows him to proceed on, so it's that kind of sacrifice you have to make,
right
down there.
And I would imagine that like, depending on which area, because we kind of introduced like regional cuisine last episode as well, that we can introduce that as well here, where it's like, oh, if you recognize where this particular dwarf goblin is from, you can be like, okay, wait, what do they like for food? What kind of food do they like? Okay, here, this is a mushroom soup that this area is really well known for. And then it like, you just see, like you see as they eat this food, they like physically change for a little bit, like something like that. It's like,
you see where they really were, like spiritually.
Yes. And that is like very Miyazaki, I can see as well, where it's like, there is a transformational aspect to the food itself. And yeah, I like that. I like that a lot, actually. Oh boy. Okay. We're making things work here. We're absolutely making things work. And by the way, like for my functionality, I was just thinking about this randomly. I would like my priestesses to be the kind of like undertakers of the tower. So they have an importance in that they are the caretakers of the dead. So it's not like they're defiling these bodies necessarily. They're just, utilizing them. But
yeah, they seem like smarter and more ritual, ceremony driven.
Yes.
So that makes sense,
Yeah, that was my hope anyway. And okay. Factions, good. Nailed it, did it, killed it. I'm seeing this world a lot better now. But one thing I still have questions. I still feel like we have so many unresolved things that we need to get to. But I wanted to bring this question up because we're very focused as of right now, except for Courtney, on like kind of the oceanic aspects, right? What I would like to talk about just a little bit is what does the rest of the tower look like? And how we're incorporating the numerous other elements from the settings with the new superstructure that is the tower. Because I see the ocean, I see the competition, I see all that. That's awesome. That's dope. What does the rest of it look like?
I wonder if we can, because there are different regions that people that live in these on the tower itself. I wonder if we can borrow something thematic from each of the three settings to build a region of people. So they're concerned with a particular thing. So for example, like I know the, let's say with the Wuxia people, there wasn't really a monarchy involved, but they had this like spiritual ascension kind of monk-esque, Jedi-esque philosophy that dealt with the sun. So you could have like a caste that is like a Heliopolis kind of sun god people who worship some version of the cat or something, and their whole shtick is about physical self-improvement. So they're all really brawny. Like you could create cultures based on the other settings. Tropes.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I like,
it's a cool idea.
What I really appreciated about Wuxia Tower was the idea that there were wandering heroes. Like there was this idea that traversing from area to area was something that you did. And the more that I think about it and the more that I've had time to sit and kind of like ruminate on this idea, Wuxia Tower and Battle of a Thousand Suns, there's a surprising amount of overlap thematically that we can really jibe with. You know what I mean? Like when I think of fighting games, which is what Battle of a Thousand Suns is heavily based on, I'm thinking specifically of Street Fighter 2, where like the whole conceit of that is like you pick your character and then your icon like travels on a plane to the country and then you fight that champion, right? So like if you're Ryu, you fly from Japan, and if you're fighting Blanca, you then fly to Brazil and then you beat the shit out of Blanca. And then you fly to Thailand to fight Sagat, like stuff like that. And like, man, like, yeah, there's a lot of overlap with the wuxia element where like you travel to various areas to fight the champion and become a master in that particular skill. And I'm like, fuck, that's so good. That works so well in terms of like overlap. But here's what I suppose I would like to focus a lot on Courtney's Land of the Thousand Dead Dwarves and figure out what elements we want to take from that to really just spice up the tower and make that region look and feel different.
Transit played a role in that setting big time, like the various vehicles on the Astral Sea. Grudges also played a role because carving your grudges into stone could root you to the living realm. So I'm wondering if like that could also carry over here where carving it or doing something with your grudge can like root you back to a certain place. I'm just not sure where to go with that.
Okay, the carving of the grudges thing I think works really well, and it doesn't necessarily we don't have to stay with grudges. But think about who carves the tower as it is right now. It's the giant cat. So like maybe there's like elements or there are certain peoples who want to emulate what the cat is doing. And as they carve into the tower, they actually get shards of creation and they're able to like express will through this kind of tower dust or tower shards or rubble or something like that. So, you're kind of creating the Vandals to your faction, right? Like the inherent conflict between your faction and this new kind of faction where they're Vandals, but they're also magically enhanced by powers of creation.
That is interesting. Now I'm picturing like, what would it look like if you had a spear with a shard of time tower as its tip? Like, how would that work?
Oh yeah. So like like you can pierce time or something like that. I mean, there's all sorts of weird stuff that you can do with, like the threads of creation. And maybe that's what we should be looking at, is that seeing them as literal threads. So you have the weavers, that you're talking about, and then we can have like the stitchers or something like that as the kind of opposing faction or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Or maybe there's also something to, since like time and death plays such a huge role here, like what if they're like stitching something of themselves into the tower, if that creates some sort of immortality, or like it's almost like a save point for them that they can return to.
It's a tether.
Yeah.
It's a literal tether, like just physically, spiritually, all that good stuff. Yeah. So these people who tether themselves to the tower, are they then like ridiculously daredevilish as a result? Like, are they just like, I'm going to just literally leap off the tower because I have a tether. I'm not worried about it. Something like that.
I do like that idea that leads to people taking greater risks and potentially like becoming stronger and more heroic for this journey across the ocean, but at the risk of like, if the cat comes along and rips up your part of the tower, then you're fucked.
Yeah. Or it might not even be the cat. It might be the weavers who are trying to repair the tower. Yeah.
Right,
It's like
right.
they see it as like a misappropriation of how the tower works. So it becomes like pardon the pun here, a cat and mouse game where it's like you have to like
Yeah.
find the hardest spot in the tower to like kind of like write your grudge into, to tether yourself to. Otherwise the squirrel folk find you and like, oh, we fixed it. And all of a sudden you look down as you're like leaping out of this 300-foot fall. And you're like, oh fuck, my tether. And then
Yep.
you're just done. Right. Like, I think that's a really fun way that we can kind of approach that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that.
Oh man, this is all working out so well. Like it's all coming together. We managed to mix in the chocolate and the peanut butter and the third element, like the what would that third, like cherries, I guess, because like those three cherry, like yeah, whatever, maybe they work for a little bit, but yeah. Yeah, no, this is all working for me. I'm loving this. Yeah. So I suppose the only thing that we really have left to do is to determine a main story quest.
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Who is the villain in this?
I think that the nature of the setting is that the world itself is so dangerous that it is basically the antagonist, right? Because
it's the conflict then.
The main conflict is still like we need to fix the world, right? Because the oceans are still receding. That's still a problem that's happening. So I mean, ultimately, it's either the solution is either slay the cat being, which is not happening. It's a fucking cosmic, unknowable god. Or find a more renewable way to replenish the threads of creation via the ocean.
Does the cat being personify itself in some way along their journey?
Is that the final boss at the bottom of the ocean? It's like the cat avatar. So it's like Shao Kahn from Mortal Kombat. It's like, you fought through Goro to get to me, and now it's time. We have the...
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be like a singular thing, although that is kind of crazy and cool. But it could be along the way there are... Like, I'm thinking like how the Cheshire Cat behaves and that it appears as you go. And it has things... Maybe it has things to put against you and things to tell you. Because if it's chaotic, sometimes it might want to help you and sometimes it might not want to.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I do like the idea of it like randomly appearing in places though. And also potentially, being the final boss at the end.
Or maybe it presents something that is like, that it represents as the conflict in the end, you know?
And mind you, just because you defeat the final boss doesn't mean that the threat is over. It's just like you've banished it for like a dozen years or something like that. So like you could technically lose a couple of tournaments before the threat. It's like, okay, we lost the last 11 rounds. We have to win. We have to get this one. Otherwise, and actually, that's an escalating threat as well. So it's like each year that you lose, you see the oceans recede just a little bit more and it becomes just a little bit more dangerous, you know, like having that kind of ramped up, that increasing tension as the years go by. That's actually a fun, and I think that's a really fun way that we can kind of approach it as well.
Yeah, I like that. And then I wonder, like, what kind of things are coming out of the ocean the more it recedes? Like,
oh yeah, the worse. Yeah, they get worse as it recedes. 100%.
Yeah.
So there's a real fucking incentive for you to do good, you know. Plus, I'm just thinking about like the kind of politics and like stories. It's like, oh, don't worry. Like this year, you know, we've got Stephen the Bold, and he's going to be the one to make it. He's going to be the one who's going to slay the cat god this year, and then we'll be good for another dozen. Don't worry, it'll be okay. Wait, what happened to Stephen the Bold? Oh no, we're suddenly fucked. And then all of it's just like, there's so many cool stories that you can tell with that kind of clock and that kind of like interesting narrative conceit, I think.
Would be along those lines, thinking about sort of like stories that Miyazaki usually tells, there's usually like a less powerful underdog involved. And I could imagine, you know, like say Stephen the Bold has failed us and we really have to pass this. We have to get these heroes in this time and we have to get them across the sea. And they really have no one left except for like these plucky kind of like this plucky undeveloped hero who is not hero or heroes that are not prepared for this, but they're the only choice. Right. And by some miracle, they win the challenge. They get past the doorway, But the virtue of these characters is that they haven't gone through all of the formal training that makes you think a certain way as a champion.
Right.
And so they're still open to the unknown and to do things that wouldn't be expected. And so the challenges the cat poses, their youth and inexperience is actually to their advantage, because they can solve things in ways it didn't expect, and it gets them far enough. And that could be like the thrust of the story.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. And what I think is fun about that as well is that, you're basically learning on the job, right? It's kind of like
Exactly.
Part of the appeal of the Lord of the Rings is watching Frodo and Sam go from like scared, or and the others too, like Merry and Pippin and stuff, where they go from like scared little hobbitses, and they're like, oh God, we're way over our heads. Oh Jesus, oh no.
They become heroes.
And then they become heroes. Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Where it's like,
Right.
oh wow, Sam's beating the shit out of those guys. Oh man, look. One of the other ones, I can't fucking remember. Look,
Merry Pippin, I think it's the one you haven't named.
No, I said Merry and Pippin. I just can't remember
okay.
which of it. I'm thinking of when they're fighting the Witch King and like like he's a distraction and stuff like that. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, look, don't come on. I haven't seen Lord of the Rings in many, many years. I'm just barely holding on to my fucking sanity. But anyway, my point is that part of that appeal of the story that we'd be able to tell is like watching them grow competent over time. And what might even be really fun about this kind of concept as like a story is maybe it starts out as, hey, they're actually followers of Stephen the Bold. And what ends up happening is that Stephen the Bold is like, oh no, I've been defeated. And then like the camera pans slightly to the left and down. And it's like, all right, Miles the Meek, it's your turn now. You've got to
That's what I was
save it.
picturing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody groans and they're like, well, I guess we're screwed,
Yes, exactly. And so like you get the underdog thing. Yeah, that works out. Beautiful, amazing, great. Okay. I feel like we've satisfied everything here. Are we good? Do we have any other questions?
No, I'd love this setting. It like I know we struggled a lot in episode 1, but I feel like this has come together in a really cool way. It's like whimsical, but there's also danger and adventure and all this cool stuff.
Absolutely. This is high on the adventure scale. I would agree with that. Yeah, for sure. Well, if that's the case, I think it's just about time to wrap everything up. Thank you again so much to Jay for allowing us to explore this concept. I know it's a little off the rails compared to what you had in mind, but I had a lot of fun doing it either way. Remember that if you want us to build your world, just like Jay here, you can always go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com. Click the link, follow the instructions, and within a reasonable amount of time, we'll be building your world. If you want to come join our Discord and chat with us and tell us about Wusha Tower or your favorite setting or anything at all, you can find a link for that in the description of this very episode. And of course, if you're feeling particularly generous or you just want access to those sweet, sweet patron-only episodes, you can go to our Patreon and donate money to us there. A huge thank you to all our patrons who keep us going every week. And with all that out of the way, that's going to do it for this episode of World Build with Us. Remember that we love you very much, and we're going to get through this together until next week.